Minister Boot, if I could come to you first. This has been coined as a bit of a U-turn. Why now?
It's not a U-turn. We've obviously launched the consultation because I think it's important that we have community buy-in and we find out what people want to do. And we are now in the last week of the consultation. We've had nearly 700 responses across a whole spectrum of age groups, and we were able to make a judgment based on that, and that enabled the Chief Minister to make his declaration or statement on Friday, and I think it's the right way to proceed. And the announcement that we're coming forward with a climate change bill, it was always in the background, but now we know where we're going, and I obviously will be part of that in driving that forward, and that will give us a tool to work with based on the consultation, also on the known science, and we will be able to catch a number of other things as well as climate change, but related, such as plastic strategies and things like this that require primary legislation. So it will enable us to have powers to deal with things more quickly coming forward.
His pledge was to formulate legislation in the next legislative year. Some commentators on social media have sort of said that doesn't really tie in with the word emergency necessarily.
Well, everything takes time in government, sadly. We have to get bills drafted. If you look at other jurisdictions, for instance, Jersey have done a similar thing. They haven't had a consultation. They're nowhere near where we are in terms of preparation for legislation. We will be driving this process, but there is still a parliamentary process to go through. I'm sure that my fellow members, when the bill comes forward, will support it, and that is our intention, to bring it forward as quickly as possible.
If I could bring in the representatives of the Climate Change Coalition we've got with us, what did you make of developments this week and recently?
Well, the whole event illustrates the tenuous nature of Isle of Man polity, but you've heard me speak about this before, the relationship between Tynwald, Parliament, legitimacy, the democracy, but political parties are trying to enter this debate to bring democracy back into the political process. However, you've heard me speak about this before. The important issue here is climate change, and I mean, obfuscation and delay. A climate change bill coming out in the next parliamentary year is just too long. We need to be acting now, and the things that can be done now, amending road tax, is something that can be done immediately. That should be entering the debate. And certainly, if there's a legislation that needs to be amended, it's the strategic plan from 2016. 5,100 houses by 2026, land, greenfield land, which is carbon sequestration land, and there's going to be carbon embedded into it, built houses with 2 garages, with cars, just perpetuating this cycle of carbon emissions. That's the legislation that needs to be for Tynwald, amending it to take these ridiculous figures devoid of merit about population growth and the need for a further 5,100 houses. That's just going to be terrible for the future generations of the Isle of Man.
If I could come to you, Joni, the Climate Change Coalition's made several demands, some of which appear to have been met, or some steps have been taken towards those being met. What would you like to see?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'd like to say that we really do welcome this announcement from the Chief Minister, but it is the first step in a very long journey, and we have to acknowledge that no action has been taken yet, although, as I say, this does open the doors to those steps that need to be taken. So, as you say, we have several demands that asks that we are putting to the government. Declaring emergency was one of them, which steps have been taken towards that. I'm not sure whether it is official. Yeah,
it's government policy now.
Yeah,
so it's adopted.
Okay, so we also have several others that we would expect the government to be acting upon very, very quickly now that they have declared an emergency. So banning fossil fuel extraction, investing in renewable infrastructure, committing to 050, I think that has already been done as well. Looking at fitting properties with insulation, low carbon heating, utilising natural solutions, and looking at investing in electrification of the public transport scheme, as well as looking at introducing free public transport. So all of those areas we would like to see strong government action on.
I'd like to just focus on the word emergency a little bit, because in common parlance, that carries with it quite a lot of urgency and immediacy. Do you think that carries the same sort of weight in perhaps political circles, Minister?
Well, I think there are two forms of an emergency. There's one where it's life-threatening and people risk. This is a longer-term risk factor. But listening to the comments made there, we've actually done an awful lot on the island, and we've not been very good at selling that story, I don't think. People don't understand what's been going on behind the scenes, and I just like to revisit that. I mean, we have whole biosphere status on the island. We got that because of our cultural and environmental situation as it was 4 or 5 years ago. We've got the 2016-20 mitigation strategy. We've fulfilled most of those obligations, and we're now looking forward to a new 10-year strategy with hard targets and annual reporting. We've got world-leading marine nature reserves. Revised building regs are imminent with new SAP ratings. We've got an agreed offshore wind farm array, but there are impediments with regard to the UK and EU preventing that happening at the moment. We've got an active travel strategy. We have energy efficiency schemes. The MUA, and Alex may well talk about this, are doing trials with electric vehicle and heat pumps. We have a new agricultural scheme which for the first time introduces environmental stewardship and carbon capture, peat sequestration and tree in various catchment areas. We've got a plastic strategy which is halfway through, and we've just had and finishing the most comprehensive climate change consultation that I know that's taken place anywhere, and it's one where we've explored what people will accept, and it's fairly obvious from the results that people want to see change and we want to see change, but it's how we pay for it. We need to get strategies where there is a benefit to the public. They will buy into that sort of strategy. Electric vehicles, for instance, they're a win-win situation on the island. Heat source pumps, electrification, active travel, people will all buy into this as they see it as a benefit to them. But when it comes to cost, they look to government to do a lot of things, but the reality is government is their money, and we have to see where we go. But there's no impediment on our part to move matters forward, but we've done a lot and we just haven't sold it.
If you don't mind me playing devil's advocate, Minister, the climate change bill, or the formation of one, some think should have been the priority, and why has that taken as long as it has?
Well, we had a strategy in place when this administration started, and we've worked through that strategy diligently, but the IPCC report only came out a short while ago in political timescales, and we've had to react to that. Until then, we were on target. We had committed to the 80% 1990 target, and we were on that trajectory. Things have changed. The goalposts have moved. We're now looking at different targets, and we have committed to near zero by 2050. We'll ban the registration of fossil fuel cars by 2045, and we're looking at removing fossil fuel boilers from new homes from 2025, in line with what's happening in the UK.
Dr. Alex Allinson, Chair of Manx Utilities, joins us. Just to pick on one of the points the Minister's made there, the net zero emissions target by 2050. We've heard from you speaking about renewables several times in recent months. How realistic is that as an aim?
It's not only realistic, it's essential. I mean, one of the things we're talking about here is the rate of change. In March this year, we had a Tynwald debate which tied in all parts of government, from DEFRA actually arriving with a policy through consultation, to the DOI looking in terms of active transport but also surface transport, to Manx Utilities looking at how to facilitate this. This is a programme right across government. I think one of the issues with a climate bill is that we don't need to wait for a bill to take action. What came out clear in the debate in March was that the previous climate strategy was talking about climate challenge. We've moved on a long way from there. But what we need to do through the legislation is actually commit not just this administration but all future administrations to set targets, to set aims, to set goals. And I think that's what has possibly been lacking over the last 10 years. In terms of using sustainable power generation, again, that's not only essential, it makes good business sense. It is now far cheaper to use solar panels, to use wind farms, to build new power stations. So when we get to the 2030s, when we need to replace our existing power station in Polrose, we probably won't. We will be using microgeneration, self-generation, renewables to actually feed into a smart grid and provide the power that we need with the energy security that we need, but at the right price that people can afford.